The cleaning cart squeaked slightly as Min pushed it down the empty hallway of the Eastman School of Music. The building had fallen quiet hours ago, most students gone for the evening, leaving just the faint echo of her movements bouncing off the polished floors. She preferred working these late shifts. The solitude gave her space to think and, more importantly, to listen. Min had been cleaning at Eastman for almost 2 years now. At 19, she wasn't much younger than many of the students who studied here, but the gulf between them felt impossibly wide. They carried expensive instrument cases and sheet music, while she carried mops and garbage bags. They wore fashionable clothes while she wore the plain gray uniform with maintenance staff embroidered above the pocket. Tonight was like most others. Min moved methodically from room to room, emptying trash bins, wiping down surfaces, and vacuuming floors. But her favorite rooms were always the practice spaces, 12 identical chambers, each containing a piano. As she cleaned practice room 7, Min's eyes kept drifting to the upright piano against the wall. The lid was left open and the ivory keys seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. She checked her watch. Still 2 hours before she needed to clock out, and the building was practically empty. Min set down her cleaning supplies and quietly closed the door. Her heart raced as she approached the piano bench and sat down, her movements careful and reverent. This wasn't the first time she had done this, but the thrill never faded. She didn't place her fingers on the keys right away. Instead, she closed her eyes and remembered the melody she had overheard earlier that day, a student struggling through Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major. The girl had cursed under her breath each time she fumbled, eventually slamming the fallboard down in frustration before storming out. Min opened her eyes, positioned her hands, and began to play the same piece. Her fingers moved with a natural grace, finding the notes without hesitation. She had never had a lesson in her life, but she had ears that missed nothing and hands that seemed to understand instinctively what to do. The nocturne flowed from the piano, filling the small room with sound that seemed too big, too emotional to be contained in such a space. Min swayed slightly as she played, her eyes half closed, lost in the music. This was her secret, how she had taught herself to play by watching the students, memorizing their hand positions, listening to the pieces over and over until they lived inside her. Growing up in a tiny apartment where her parents worked double shifts to keep food on the table, a piano had been an impossible dream. The closest she had come was a small electronic keyboard her uncle had found at a garage sale when she was 11. The keys were plastic, the sound tinny and artificial, but Min had played it until 3 of the keys stopped working. Now, surrounded by dozens of real pianos, Min felt like she had stumbled into paradise. Each night she allowed herself this stolen time to play, careful to memorize exactly how she found the room so she could return it to that state before leaving. As the final notes of the nocturne faded, Min sat perfectly still, letting the echo hang in the air before disappearing. Then she moved on to another piece, this one by Rachmaninoff, which she had heard performed in the main concert hall last month. It was far more difficult, with crashing chords and intricate runs that stretched her hands to their limits. But the challenge thrilled her. She was so absorbed in the music that she didn't hear the door open. "You're not supposed to be doing that," a voice said from behind her. Min jumped, her hands slamming discordantly on the keys as she spun around. A maintenance supervisor stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "I'm sorry," Min stammered, standing up so quickly that she knocked the bench backward. I was taking a break and You were playing," the man said simply. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a name tag that read Lou. Min had seen him around but had never spoken to him directly. "I won't do it again," Min promised, already reaching for her cart. Her heart pounded painfully. She needed this job, needed the steady paycheck to help her family. What if he reported her? Lou stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "What was that piece?" "The second one." Min blinked in confusion. "Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. "And who taught you to play like that?" Min looked down at her hands. "Nobody. Listen." Lou was quiet for so long that Min finally looked up. His expression had softened. "My daughter studied here," he said. "Piano performance. Cost me and my wife everything to keep her in lessons from the time she was 5. "And you?" He shook his head in disbelief. Min didn't know what to say, so she waited, her future hanging in the balance. "Play something else," Lou said finally. What? Play something else. Something you've heard recently. Still uncertain, Min sat back down at the piano. After a moment's hesitation, she began to play a Bach invention she had heard a student working on that morning. The counterpoint was complex, the interweaving melodies demanding complete independence of her hands. But Min navigated it with a natural ease that belied her lack of training. When she finished, Lou was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. You know, there's a big event happening next week, he said. Some famous pianist giving a master class followed by a reception. They'll have the Steinway Grand set up in the main hall. Min nodded. She had already been told she would need to help set up chairs and clean before and after the event. What would you do? Lou asked carefully. If you had the chance to play that Steinway. The question made Min's chest tighten. The thought of playing the school's prized concert grand, the 9-foot glossy black piano that was rolled out only for special performances, was almost too much to imagine. I'd never get that chance, she said, turning away to straighten the bench. Maybe not, Lou agreed. But if you did? Min thought about it. Really thought about what it would feel like to sit at that bench, to feel those perfectly regulated keys under her fingers, to hear her music amplified by the magnificent soundboard of a concert grand piano. I would play the Rachmaninoff, she said softly. The whole first movement. Lou nodded as if she had passed some test. I'll make you a deal, he said. I won't report this if you promise to only play after 10 p.m. and only for half an hour each night. And you need to leave the rooms exactly as you found them. Relief washed over Min. I promise, she said quickly. Good. Lou turned to leave, then paused. You know, my shift that night ends right after the master class, before the reception starts. Their eyes met, and Min understood what he was suggesting. The idea was terrifying, thrilling, impossible. They would never let someone like me touch that piano, she said. Probably not, Lou agreed. But life's funny sometimes. Opportunities appear when you least expect them. He left, and Min stood frozen for several minutes, her mind racing with possibilities. Then carefully she closed the lid of the piano, wiped down the bench, and continued her cleaning rounds. For the next week, Min was more careful than ever. She kept her promise to Lou, playing only after 10 p.m. and only for half an hour. But her practice took on a new intensity. Every night she worked on the Rachmaninoff concerto, imagining how it would sound on the Steinway Grand. During the day, as she mopped floors and emptied trash, Min watched the preparations for the master class. She saw the stage being set up, the chairs arranged in neat rows, and finally the magnificent Steinway being rolled carefully into position. Once, when no one was looking, she reached out and touched its glossy surface, feeling the smooth coolness under her fingertips. The night before the event, Min couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the small bedroom she shared with her younger sister, staring at the ceiling and wondering what might happen the next day. Would she find the courage if an opportunity arose? Would she be laughed at or worse, fired on the spot? As dawn broke, Min made a decision. She would be ready. If a chance came, however unlikely, she would take it. After all, what was the worst that could happen? She had spent her whole life being invisible. At least for one moment she would be seen, be heard. Whether they laughed or not, at least they would know she existed. The day of the master class arrived with a flurry of activity. Min showed up for her shift 2 hours early, unable to stay away. She kept to the edges of the main hall, dusting the same surfaces repeatedly as she watched the final preparations unfold. The enormous Steinway grand piano dominated the stage, its lid propped open like a giant black wing. Students began filtering in around noon, dressed in their finest clothes. Min noticed how they carried themselves, back straight, chins up, walking with the confidence of people who belonged. She pulled her gray uniform jacket closer, trying to make herself smaller as she emptied trash bins and wiped down surfaces. You need to finish up in here, her supervisor told her. They're about to start. Min nodded and gathered her cleaning supplies, but instead of leaving, she slipped into the back row of seats. Nobody noticed the cleaning girl sitting quietly in the corner. The lights dimmed slightly, and a hush fell over the crowd as the dean of the school stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to introduce one of the world's most celebrated pianists, Mr. Anton Volkov. Applause erupted as a tall man with silver hair and a black suit walked confidently to center stage. Min leaned forward in her seat. She had seen his face on posters around the school for weeks, but in person he seemed even more imposing. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, sweeping across the audience as he gave a slight bow. For the next 2 hours, Min sat completely still, absorbing every word as Volkov worked with 5 advanced students. He was demanding but kind, stopping them mid-phrase to demonstrate a different approach to a passage or to explain the historical context behind a piece. His hands moved like living things with minds of their own, drawing sounds from the piano that made Min's heart ache. "Music is not in the notes," he told a student struggling with a Beethoven sonata. "It is in the silence between them, in the weight of your touch, in the courage to be vulnerable through sound." Min's fingers twitched in her lap, unconsciously mimicking the movements she was watching. When Volkov demonstrated a particularly difficult passage from Rachmaninoff, the very piece Min had been secretly practicing, she held her breath. His interpretation was different from what she had imagined, more patient in some places, more urgent in others. As the masterclass concluded, Min slipped out before the lights came up fully. She had to prepare for her regular shift, which would begin just as the reception was starting. Her mind raced as she changed into her fresh uniform in the small employee bathroom. "Did you see it?" Lou asked when she reported for her evening shift. Min nodded, unable to find words for what she had experienced. "Reception starts in an hour," he said quietly. "They'll all be in the main hall, students, faculty, guests." He gave her a meaningful look. "The piano will be there." Min's stomach tightened. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" Lou said innocently, checking his clipboard. "Just make sure the bathrooms are stocked and the floors are clean. That's all I'm saying." He walked away, leaving Min standing alone with her racing thoughts. The reception began promptly at 7. Min pushed her cart slowly through the hallways, taking much longer than usual to complete her tasks. She could hear the murmur of voices and occasional laughter from the main hall. Twice she walked past the wide double doors, glancing inside at the crowd of well-dressed people holding wine glasses and small plates of food. The Steinway remained on stage, untouched. By 8:30, the reception was in full swing. Min finished cleaning the last bathroom and realized she had run out of reasons to delay. She pushed her cart into a storage closet and stood in the empty hallway, heart pounding. "Just walk in," she told herself. "Just look. Nobody will even notice you." Taking a deep breath, Min smoothed her uniform and entered the main hall. The space was packed with people engaged in animated conversations. Faculty members in formal attire mingled with students and visitors. A small table of refreshments stood against one wall, and there on the stage the magnificent Steinway waited. Min moved carefully around the edges of the room, pretending to check trash bins. Nobody paid any attention to the maintenance worker doing her job. She made her way closer to the stage, drawn to the piano like a magnet. Up close, the instrument was even more beautiful, the glossy black surface reflecting the overhead lights, the intricate craftsmanship of the frame, the perfect ivory and ebony keys. Min glanced around. Everyone was engaged in conversation, their backs to the stage. Before she could change her mind, Min slipped behind a curtain and climbed the 3 steps to the stage. Her heart was beating so hard she was sure everyone must hear it. She stood beside the piano for a long moment, frozen in indecision. "What are you doing up there?" The sharp voice cut through the background noise. Min turned to see a young man in an expensive suit looking up at her, his eyebrows raised. Other heads began to turn. "The cleaning supplies are in the closet, honey," someone called out, triggering a ripple of laughter. Min felt heat rising in her cheeks. She should leave, should hurry off the stage and back to the safety of her cleaning cart. But something kept her rooted to the spot. Perhaps the memory of Volkov's words about courage. Perhaps the knowledge that this chance would never come again. Before she could second-guess herself, Min sat down at the piano bench. The laughter grew louder. "Is she serious?" a female voice asked. "Someone should stop her before she damages the Steinway," another person said. Min placed her hands on the keys, feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingers. The action was lighter than the practice room pianos, more responsive. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the hall, dark, resonant, and powerful. The laughter stopped abruptly. Min kept her eyes closed, focusing entirely on the music flowing through her hands. Each note was clear and purposeful, building the somber introduction with a confidence that belied her racing heart. As she moved into the main theme, Her fingers flew across the keys with increasing speed and precision. The piece was incredibly difficult. Massive chords in the left hand supporting intricate melodic passages in the right. But Min had been practicing it for months. Listening to recordings, watching students struggle with small sections of it. In her mind, she could hear the full orchestra that should be accompanying her, and somehow her playing suggested those missing instruments. She forgot about the people watching. Forgot about her uniform, her job, her fears. There was only the music, the soaring melodies, the complex harmonies, the emotional journey from darkness into light. Her small body swayed with the rhythm, her face reflecting every nuance of feeling in the piece. When Min reached a particularly challenging passage, a cascade of notes that required both speed and delicacy, she heard someone gasp. Still, she didn't open her eyes, didn't break the spell of complete concentration. Her fingers found each note unerringly, as if she had been playing this piano all her life instead of just these few minutes. The first movement of the concerto lasted nearly 11 minutes. Min played it all, building to the triumphant conclusion with growing intensity. When she struck the final chords, the sound reverberated through the hall like thunder. Only then did she open her eyes. The room was completely silent. Dozens of faces stared at her in astonishment. Students, faculty, guests, all frozen in disbelief. In the front row, Anton Volkov himself stood motionless, his wine glass tilted dangerously in his hand as if he had forgotten he was holding it. The silence stretched for several seconds. Min's hands trembled as she lowered them to her lap. What had she done? Would she be fired? Thrown out? Arrested for touching an instrument worth more than she would earn in 10 years? Then from the back of the room someone began to clap. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the hall completely. Min sat stunned, unable to process what was happening. She saw the dean whispering urgently to Volkov. Both men looking at her with intense interest. Lou appeared at the edge of the stage, giving her a small nod and the ghost of a smile before disappearing back into the crowd. Anton Volkov set down his glass and walked toward the stage, his expression unreadable. The crowd parted to let him through, the applause fading as people waited to see what would happen next. Min stood up quickly, nearly knocking over the piano bench. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "I shouldn't have." Volkov held up his hand, silencing her apology. He climbed the steps slowly, never taking his eyes off her face. When he reached the top, he looked at her. Really looked at her. Taking in the gray maintenance uniform, the badge with her name, the hands that had just created such extraordinary music. "Who are you?" he asked simply. Min swallowed hard. "I clean the building at night." "I'm nobody." "Nobody?" Volkov repeated, his accent making the word sound profound. He glanced at the piano, then back at her. "Nobody does not play Rachmaninoff like that." "Tell me your name." "Min," she whispered. "Min," he repeated. "And who taught you to play like this, Min?" The entire room seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for her answer. "Nobody taught me," Min said, her voice barely audible over the murmuring crowd. "I just listen." Anton Volkov's eyebrows rose slightly. "Listen?" Min's hands twisted nervously at her sides. With everyone staring at her, she wished she could disappear. The stage lights felt too bright, too exposing. "I clean the practice rooms at night," she explained, her words coming faster now. "I hear students playing. I watch through the windows sometimes to see how their hands move. And then when everyone's gone, I try to play what I've heard." Volkov exchanged glances with the dean who had joined them on stage. The older man looked equally bewildered. "You're saying you have never had formal lessons?" the dean asked. "Not a single one?" Min shook her head. "My parents couldn't afford it." "But that's not possible," a young woman called from the crowd, one of the piano students who had performed in the master class earlier. "The Rachmaninoff concerto takes years of training. You can't just pick it up by ear." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Min felt her face burning with embarrassment. They thought she was lying. "Perhaps a demonstration," Volkov suggested, his piercing gaze still fixed on Min. He turned to the crowd and raised his voice. "Earlier today, during the master class, I played a section from Debussy's Clair de Lune, approximately 2 minutes of music that was not on the program. It was an impromptu decision to illustrate a point about touch." He turned back to Min. "Did you hear this?" Min nodded hesitantly. She had been sitting in the back row, absorbing every note. Would you play it for us now? Volkov asked, gesturing to the piano. The room fell silent again. Min glanced at the imposing instrument, then back at Volkov. His face gave away nothing. No encouragement, no skepticism, just intense curiosity. Taking a deep breath, Min returned to the bench. The keys felt both familiar and strange beneath her fingers as she positioned her hands. She closed her eyes, recalling the delicate, dreamlike melody Volkov had played that afternoon. Then she began. The gentle opening notes of Claire de Lune floated through the hall, soft, ethereal, and hauntingly beautiful. Min's touch was feather-light, each note blending into the next like watercolors on paper. As the piece progressed, she captured not just the notes but the very essence of Volkov's interpretation. The subtle hesitations, the almost imperceptible ebbs and flows of tempo, the way he had lingered on certain harmonies. When she finished, Min opened her eyes to find Volkov standing beside the piano, his expression transformed. Gone was the cool assessment, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. "Remarkable," he said quietly. "You played it exactly as I did, including my own personal phrasing choices that are not in the score." The dean stepped forward. "Miss Min, is it? Would you mind telling us your full name?" "Min Chen," she replied, her voice steadier now. "Miss Chen, how long have you been working here at Eastman?" "Almost 2 years, sir. And all this time you've been teaching yourself to play? By listening and watching?" Min nodded, unsure where this was heading. The dean turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are witnessing something extraordinary here. A natural talent of the highest order." He looked back at Min. "Would you be willing to play something else for us? Something of your choice?" Heart-racing, Min nodded again. This time, she chose a piece she had heard countless times through practice room doors. Bach's Prelude in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier. Simple in structure but profound in its harmonic journey, it was a piece that had always moved her deeply. As she played, Min felt something shift in the atmosphere of the room. The initial shock was giving way to genuine appreciation. When she finished, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Volkov leaned against the piano, studying her with undisguised fascination. "Your technique is unorthodox," he observed. "You've developed your own fingering solutions, your own approach to the keyboard. Some of it breaks conventional rules, and yet it works." He shook his head in amazement. "In some ways, this is better. You have no bad habits to unlearn, no rigid methods to overcome. You play from pure instinct." The dean cleared his throat. "Miss Chen, would you step outside with Mr. Volkov and me for a moment? I believe we have something important to discuss." Min followed the two men into the hallway, her legs wobbly beneath her. This couldn't be real. Any second now, she would wake up in her small bedroom, the dream fading away. In the quiet of the hallway, the dean spoke first. "Miss Chen, what you've demonstrated tonight is exceptionally rare. A gift that shouldn't be wasted, I agree," said Volkov. "I have been teaching for 40 years, and I have never seen anything quite like this." He fixed Min with an intense gaze. "You must study properly. Develop this talent." Min looked down at her worn shoes. "I can't afford to study here," she said simply. "That's why I took the cleaning job, to be near the music at least." The dean and Volkov exchanged glances. "We have scholarship programs," the dean said, "for exceptional cases." "This goes beyond exceptional," Volkov interjected. "I would call it unprecedented." Min's heart began to race. Were they suggesting what she thought they were suggesting? The dean smiled for the first time. "Miss Chen, I believe we can find a way to offer you a full scholarship to study piano performance at Eastman. With proper training, there's no telling what you might achieve." Min's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," the dean confirmed. "Though there would be conditions. You would need to dedicate yourself fully to your studies. The cleaning job would have to go. You'll need those hours for practice." "But my family," Min said quickly. "I help support them. My paycheck, work-study positions are also available," the dean assured her. "Perhaps in the music library or as a teaching assistant once you've advanced enough. The pay is actually better than maintenance." Min felt dizzy with possibility. Was this really happening? "I would like to work with you myself," Volkov added. "I am in residence here for the semester. We can begin immediately." Before Min could respond, the door to the main hall opened and several students peered out curiously. They had clearly been listening at the door. "Is it true?" asked a young man with glasses. Are you actually giving her a scholarship? The dean nodded. Miss Chen has demonstrated extraordinary ability. The school would be remiss not to nurture such talent. The students exchanged glances. Min recognized one of them. Lily, a girl who had often smiled at her when she cleaned the practice rooms, one of the few who had ever acknowledged her presence. That's wonderful, Lily said, stepping forward to offer her hand to Min. Your playing was incredible. I've been working on that Rachmaninoff for 2 years, and I still can't get through the first movement without mistakes. Other students followed Lily's lead, introducing themselves, asking questions, showing genuine interest. Min felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention. Just hours ago, she had been invisible to these people. Not everyone was enthusiastic, however. Min noticed a few students hanging back, whispering to each other with skeptical expressions. One tall boy looked particularly upset. This is ridiculous, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Some of us have been studying piano since we were 4 years old. We've dedicated our entire lives to get here, and now someone with no training just walks in and gets a full ride? How is that fair? An uncomfortable silence fell over the group. Min felt her moment of joy begin to crumble. Fair? Volkov repeated, his voice sharp. Was it fair that Miss Chen was born with extraordinary talent but no access to education? Is it fair that some are born into privilege while others must clean floors at night? Life is not fair, young man. Music is not fair. Some work for decades and achieve competence. Others are born with gifts that cannot be taught, he turned to Min. The question is not whether you deserve this opportunity. The question is what you will do with it. Min looked around at the faces surrounding her. Some welcoming, some doubtful, some openly hostile. She realized that getting the scholarship was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. I want to learn, she said firmly. I want to work harder than anyone has ever worked before. I want to deserve this chance you're giving me. Volkov nodded, satisfied. Good answer. We begin tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock sharp. Do not be late. As the group dispersed, Min found herself standing alone with the dean, who handed her a thick packet of forms. Fill these out and bring them tomorrow. We'll need to register you for classes, arrange for your scholarship, sort out your new schedule. He smiled. Your life is about to change dramatically, Miss Chen. Are you ready for that? Min thought about her tiny apartment, her exhausted parents, her secret midnight practice sessions. She thought about the years of watching others live her dream while she emptied their trash bins. Yes, she said, clutching the papers to her chest. I've been ready my whole life. The first day of Min's new life began before dawn. She woke at 5, too nervous to sleep any longer, and sat on the edge of her bed in the dark. Her younger sister May still slept soundly on the other side of the small room they shared. Min dressed quietly, pulling on her best clothes, a simple blue sweater and black pants that she usually saved for special occasions. They weren't fancy, but at least they weren't her maintenance uniform. She brushed her hair carefully and tied it back, wanting to look as professional as possible. In the kitchen, she found her father already awake, making tea before his early shift at the restaurant. You're up early, he said in Mandarin, eyeing her outfit with curiosity. Min took a deep breath. She hadn't told her parents yet. Everything had happened so fast and she'd come home late last night after they were already asleep. Now the moment had arrived and she felt suddenly tongue-tied. Baba, something happened yesterday, she began. Something big. Her father set down his tea, listening intently as Min told the whole story. The masterclass, the reception, her impulsive decision to play the Steinway, and the scholarship offer that had followed. His expression changed from confusion to disbelief to something like awe. Is this real? He asked when she finished. They want you to become a student? A real piano student? Min nodded, showing him the paperwork the dean had given her. A full scholarship, and they'll help me find a job on campus that pays better than cleaning. Her father's eyes filled with tears. He called out to her mother, who appeared in the doorway tying her robe. The story had to be told again, with her mother gasping at various points and asking a dozen practical questions. But how will you have time to study and work? She asked worriedly. The scholarship covers everything, Ma. Tuition, books, even private lessons with Professor Volkov. I'll only need to work part-time. Her parents exchanged looks, the silent communication of a couple who had weathered many hardships together. Your grandfather was a musician before the Cultural Revolution, her father said quietly. Did you know that? He played the erhu in the village orchestra. He always said music was in our blood. Min hadn't known this. Her grandfather had died before she was born, and family history was rarely discussed in their busy household. He would be so proud, her mother added, squeezing Min's hand, as we are. With her parents' blessing warming her heart, Min headed to Eastman for her first official day as a student. The campus looked different somehow. No longer a workplace, but a place of possibility. She climbed the steps to the main entrance, conscious of how strange it felt to walk through the front doors instead of the service entrance she'd used for 2 years. The dean's office was expecting her. A secretary took her completed forms and gave her a student ID card, a class schedule, and a practice room assignment. Professor Volkov is waiting for you in room 312, she said with a smile. Best not to keep him waiting. Min hurried through hallways she had previously only walked when cleaning them. Students were everywhere now, carrying instrument cases and sheet music, chatting in groups. A few glanced at her curiously as she passed, perhaps recognizing her from the night before. Room 312 was a spacious studio with 2 grand pianos. Volkov sat at one of them, marking notations on a piece of sheet music. He looked up as Min entered, his stern face unreadable. "You're early," he said, checking his watch. "Good. Punctuality is essential in music. A single late entrance can ruin an entire performance." Min stood awkwardly, unsure where to put herself. Without her cleaning card, her hands felt empty, purposeless. "Sit," Volkov instructed, gesturing to the second piano. "Show me your hands." Min sat and held out her hands, palm down. Volkov took them in his, turning them over, examining them with professional interest. "Strong fingers from your cleaning work. Good calluses already. But your technique needs complete reconstruction." He released her hands. "Today we begin with the fundamentals. You must unlearn some habits and learn new ones." For the next 2 hours, Min did nothing but finger exercises. Simple 5-note patterns up and down the keyboard over and over. Volkov was exacting, stopping her frequently to adjust the curve of her fingers or the position of her wrists. "No, no," he said for what felt like the 100th time. "Your 4th finger collapses. Keep the arch." Again. Min repeated the exercise, focusing intently on maintaining the proper hand position. It felt awkward, unnatural. Her hands began to ache. "Better," Volkov said finally. "A small improvement. We will work on this for several weeks before moving to actual pieces." Min's heart sank. "Weeks just for finger exercises?" Volkov's eyebrows shot up. "You think this is boring? You think real musicianship comes without foundation?" He tapped the piano sharply. "You have a gift, yes, but it is like a wild vine, growing strongly but in all directions. We must prune, train, cultivate." Min nodded, chastened. "I understand." "I'm sorry." Volkov's expression softened slightly. "Your ear is exceptional. Your instinct remarkable. But technique is the vessel that will hold your talent. Without it, your music will always be limited." He stood up. "Practice these exercises for 2 more hours today. Tomorrow we will add scales." As Volkov gathered his things to leave, there was a knock at the door. A tall boy entered, the same one who had objected to Min's scholarship the night before. He stopped short when he saw Min. "Sorry, Professor. I didn't realize you were still in your lesson." "Ah, Dmitri," Volkov said. "Come in, I want you to meet Min Chen, our newest student." "Min, this is Dmitri Petrov, one of our most advanced pianists." Dmitri gave a stiff nod, barely meeting Min's eyes. "We've met." "Excellent," said Volkov, either missing or ignoring the tension. "Dmitri will be in several of your classes, Min. Perhaps he can help you find your way around today." He looked at Dmitri. "You wouldn't mind showing Miss Chen to the theory classroom after lunch, would you?" Dmitri's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Of course not, Professor." After Volkov left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Dmitri stood by the door, making no move to leave. "You don't have to show me around," Min said quietly. "I know where everything is from cleaning the building." Dmitri's mouth tightened. "Right. The janitor turned piano prodigy. The talk of the school." Min said nothing, wishing he would leave so she could practice in peace. "Look," Dmitri said, taking a step closer. "I've worked my entire life for this. My parents spent their savings on lessons since I was 5. I practiced 6 hours every day. I won 3 international competitions to get here." His voice grew more intense. "And now everyone's falling all over themselves about you. Someone who's never had a single lesson." Min met his gaze steadily. "I didn't ask for any of this." That's not the point. Do you have any idea how insulting this is to those of us who've actually worked for it? Min felt a flash of anger. You think I haven't worked? Try cleaning toilets all night and then going home to a tiny apartment where you can't even practice because the walls are too thin and your family needs to sleep before their next shift. Try teaching yourself from nothing. No teacher, no piano, no sheet music. Dmitri seemed taken aback by her outburst. He studied her for a moment. You really taught yourself everything? Just by listening? Min nodded. I had a toy keyboard when I was younger. 3 keys broke. I used to draw the rest of the keyboard on paper so I could practice fingerings. Something shifted in Dmitri's expression. Not quite softening, but a crack in the hostility. That Rachmaninoff you played, how did you learn it? There's a recording room on the 3rd floor. Sometimes students record themselves playing. I clean in there late at night and I listen to the recordings. Over and over. Then I try to play what I've heard. Dmitri shook his head in disbelief. That's actually kind of amazing, he hesitated. Not that it changes anything. You've still got years of catching up to do with theory, sight reading, music history. I know, Min said. That's why I'm starting with finger exercises. A hint of a genuine smile crossed Dmitri's face. Volkov's infamous finger drills. He made me do those for a month when I first came here. He headed toward the door, then paused. Theory class is in room 214. It starts at 1. Don't be late. Professor Wu locks the door exactly on the hour. Thank you, Min said, surprised by the small gesture of help. After Dmitri left, Min turned back to the piano and resumed the finger exercises. The repetition was mind-numbing, but she pushed through the boredom, understanding now what Volkov had meant about building a foundation. Lunchtime came and went, but Min didn't stop practicing. She couldn't afford to waste a single minute. When it was finally time for theory class, she gathered her new textbooks and hurried to room 214, slipping in just as Professor Wu was about to close the door. The classroom fell silent as she entered. 20 pairs of eyes followed her as she looked for an empty seat. She spotted one near the back and quickly sat down, keeping her eyes on her desk as whispers rippled through the room. Ah, Miss Chen, Professor Wu said. Our new student, welcome. Min nodded politely, feeling every eye still on her. Professor Wu turned to write on the board and a small folded paper landed on Min's desk. She opened it cautiously. Lunch tomorrow? Piano lounge. Lily Min glanced across the room and saw Lily give her a small wave and a warm smile. Something tight in Min's chest loosened slightly. Maybe she wouldn't be completely alone here after all. The theory lesson was overwhelming. Professor Wu moved quickly through concepts of harmony and chord progressions that everyone else seemed to understand easily. Min frantically took notes, trying to connect what she was hearing with what she already knew intuitively from playing. By the end of the class, her head was spinning with new terminology: dominant sevenths, secondary dominants, Neapolitan sixths. She had always understood these sounds in her playing, but never had names for them. As students filed out, Professor Wu called Min to his desk. Miss Chen, I understand your situation is unusual. You may find theory challenging at first without prior formal training. Min nodded, embarrassed. I'm already behind. Yes, but not irreparably so. He handed her a stack of worksheets. These cover the basics we've already completed this semester. Come to my office hours if you need help. Min added the worksheets to her already full bag. Thank you, Professor. As she left the classroom, the reality of her situation hit her with full force. She had been so focused on getting this opportunity that she hadn't fully considered how hard it would be to catch up. Everyone else had years of training. Everyone else belonged here. She found her assigned practice room and sat heavily on the bench. For the first time since the previous night's triumph, doubt crept in. What if she couldn't do this? What if her gift wasn't enough? What if the scholarship was a mistake? Min placed her hands on the keys, preparing to resume her finger exercises. As she did, she remembered her father's words from that morning. Music was in our blood. She thought of her grandfather playing the air who, of her parents' pride, of Lou noticing her talent and giving her a chance. Taking a deep breath, Min began to play, the same simple 5-note pattern over and over and over again, the foundation of everything to come. 6 months passed in a blur of practice rooms, theory classes, and private lessons. Min's days began before sunrise and ended long after sunset. every spare minute devoted to catching up on years of formal training she had missed. Her fingers developed new calluses, not from pushing mop handles and scrubbing toilets, but from hours at the keyboard. Professor Volkov pushed her relentlessly. Again, he would say after she played through a Bach invention. Your left hand is mechanical. Make it sing. And Min would play it again and again until her arms ached and her eyes burned with fatigue. Theory was her greatest challenge. While her ear had always guided her playing, now she had to understand the mathematical precision behind the music. The architecture of sonatas, the complex rules of counterpoint, the historical evolution of harmony. You're improving, Professor Wu told her after she turned in a particularly difficult analysis assignment. Your instincts were always good. Now your knowledge is beginning to catch up. Not everyone was as encouraging. Some students still viewed her as an interloper, a curiosity who had bypassed the traditional path they had followed. Dmitri remained coolly competitive, though the open hostility of their first encounter had gradually given way to a grudging respect. Your Bach is getting better, he told her one day after hearing her practice. Coming from Dmitri, it was high praise indeed. Lily had become Min's closest friend, helping her navigate the unwritten rules of conservatory life and sharing her own class notes from previous semesters. The spring recital list is up, Lily announced one afternoon as she burst into Min's practice room. And guess who's playing the closing piece? Min looked up from the Chopin etude she'd been wrestling with for weeks. Who? Lily's grin widened. You. Volkov recommended you for the Rachmaninoff, the same concerto you played that first night. Min's stomach dropped. But that's always reserved for graduating seniors, for the best student in the program. Well, apparently Volkov thinks you're ready, and the dean agreed. Min set her hands in her lap, suddenly feeling lightheaded. The spring recital was the biggest event of the year, attended by everyone in the school plus alumni, donors, and representatives from orchestras and graduate programs across the country. I can't, she whispered. I'm not ready. I've only been studying formally for 6 months. Lily sat beside her on the bench. Volkov wouldn't have recommended you if he didn't believe in you. Besides, it's the perfect piece for you. It's where this whole journey started. Min remembered that night 6 months ago, how the laughter had turned to stunned silence, how her life had changed in the space of 11 minutes. Could she recreate that magic, but this time with proper technique behind her natural talent? That evening she stayed later than usual, playing through the concerto from memory. The piece felt different now. She understood its architecture, the deliberate choices Rachmaninoff had made in its composition. Her own interpretation had evolved, informed by months of intensive study. As she played the final page, she became aware of someone listening from the doorway. She turned to find Lou, her former supervisor, standing there with a smile on his face. Still sounds pretty good to me, he said. Min hadn't seen him since that transformative night. Lou, I've been meaning to thank you for encouraging me, for not reporting me when I played after hours. He waved away her thanks. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it. He leaned against the wall. The custodial staff is all talking about the spring recital. We're planning to attend, if that's okay with you. Of course it's okay, Min said, touched by the gesture. I'd be honored. Just don't forget us little people when you're famous, he joked. Min laughed. Never. I'll always be the girl with the cleaning cart who couldn't stay away from the pianos. The next few weeks were the most intense of Min's life. Volkov arranged for her to have additional practice time with the accompanist who would play the orchestral reduction on the second piano. Every detail was scrutinized, refined, polished to perfection. The notes are correct, Volkov said after one particularly grueling session. Now we must find the truth behind them. Min wasn't sure what he meant until one afternoon when he sat her down away from the piano. Tell me, he said, what is this concerto about? Not the notes, not the structure. What is its heart? Min thought carefully. It's about darkness and light, about finding your way through despair to hope. Volkov nodded, his eyes bright with interest. And why does this speak to you? The question caught Min off guard. She had never considered why this particular piece had called to her so strongly. Because, she began slowly, because that's my story too. Working in the shadows, finding moments of light through music, hoping for something more. Yes, Volkov said simply. Now play it that way. Play your story through Rachmaninoff's notes. The night of the spring recital arrived with a flurry of activity. The concert hall was filled to capacity, buzzing with anticipation. Min peeked through the curtain and immediately wished she hadn't. Her parents and sister sat in the front row, her father wearing his only suit. Behind them she spotted Lou and several other maintenance workers dressed in their Sunday best. Faculty members, students, and distinguished guests filled the remaining seats. Backstage, other performers adjusted bow ties, tuned instruments, and paced nervously. Min stood apart, trying to calm her racing heart. She wore a simple black dress borrowed from Lily, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. Dmitri approached, looking elegant in his tuxedo. He would be performing a Liszt sonata in the first half of the program. "Nervous?" he asked. Min nodded, unable to pretend otherwise. "Good," Dmitri said. "Nervousness means you care. Channel it into the music." He hesitated, then added, "You've earned your place here, you know. No one can deny that anymore." Before Min could respond, he was called to the stage. She listened as he played his piece with technical brilliance and emotional depth. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. One by one, the other performers took their turns. Each piece was polished, professional, representing countless hours of dedicated practice. Min's anxiety grew as her time approached. During the brief intermission, Lily appeared at her side with a cup of tea. "Drink this. It'll help your hands stay warm." "What if I fail?" Min whispered. "What if I freeze?" Lily squeezed her shoulder. "Remember how you played before you had any training at all? When you didn't know enough to be scared? Find that girl again." The intermission ended and the second half of the program began. Min stood in the wings, breathing deeply as the penultimate performer completed their piece. Then the dean stepped onto the stage to introduce the final performance of the evening. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to introduce a student who joined us under extraordinary circumstances just 6 months ago. Her journey reminds us that talent can be found in the most unexpected places, and that music transcends all boundaries. Please welcome Min Chen, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 in C minor." Min walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding her. She bowed to polite applause, then settled at the piano bench, adjusting its height slightly. The accompanist at the second piano nodded, ready to follow her lead. For a moment, Min sat perfectly still, gathering herself. She glanced into the audience and saw her father's encouraging smile, her mother's proud tears. She saw Lou giving her a subtle thumbs up. She saw Professor Volkov, his face serious but his eyes conveying complete confidence. Min placed her hands on the keys and began the famous opening chords, dark, resonant, building in intensity. As she played, the months of technical training merged with her natural instinct for the music. Her fingers found each note with precision, but it was her heart that shaped the phrases, that breathed life into Rachmaninoff's composition. The first movement unfolded with a passionate intensity that held the audience spellbound. When she reached the cadenza, a virtuosic solo passage where the piano takes center stage, Min felt a curious sense of freedom. This wasn't an exam to pass or a test to prove herself. This was her voice speaking through the composer's notes. The lyrical second movement flowed like a conversation between piano and orchestra, intimate and expressive. Min found herself thinking of all the conversations that had led her here, her father telling her about her grandfather's musical past, Lou encouraging her to seize her chance, Volkov demanding excellence while nurturing her gift. By the time she reached the triumphant third movement, Min was no longer playing for the audience or even for herself. She was playing for the music itself, honoring its power to transform lives, her life. Her hands moved with newfound confidence, navigating the most challenging passages with fluidity and grace. The final moments of the concerto built to an exhilarating climax, the theme returning with renewed vigor and hope. Min poured everything into those last bars, all the struggles, the doubts, the breakthroughs, the small victories that had marked her journey. As she struck the final chord, there was a moment of complete silence, that magical pause when an audience is too moved to immediately respond. Then the hall erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with unrestrained enthusiasm. Min stood and bowed, momentarily overwhelmed by the response. She saw Volkov in the audience, nodding with satisfaction. She saw her family clapping until their hands must have hurt. She saw her fellow students, even Dmitri, standing and applauding her success.